And you can see that it really blocks their ability to make better choices, feel like they have a choice at all, to move past the resentment and the anger, perhaps the guilt.
Hello and welcome to Holistic Circle podcast, Spiritual Conversation. My name is Philipp Kobald. We are passionate about reaching out to people who are, I got it wrong, introduction this year. Okay, I skipped my own introduction and say hello, Jodi-Ann Goulter in Australia. Hello,
Hi, good
Jodi-Ann.
evening. How are you?
Great. I just should not make introductions this year. Everything else is just perfect. For me, it's good morning. For you, it's good evening. So that's wonderful. We always start the podcast to giving my guests some couple of moments to make some small introduction so people can get to know you, a little bit background, just a couple of minutes to get the ball rolling. So here's a kind, and let's start from there.
Okay. My name's Jodi-Ann. I have a company that's called Jodi-Ann Intuition. So it is an umbrella company that I blend my intuitive skills through spiritual media, animal communication, Reiki energy healing, access consciousness, distance healing with storytelling. So I blend a holistic practice with science-backed and provide stories for corporate wellness, particularly for women, because as a mum myself and a full-time worker, business owner, we wear many hats. And I feel over the 29 years that I have taught in schools that the women, the mothers, the aunts, the grandmas have taken COVID and post-COVID, all the different situations globally around the world have taken a toll on women. And I just want to try and align and balance people's lives with daily practice.
Maybe for the people who are outside of Australia, they don't know that Australians' COVID experience was a bit
Yeah.
rougher than most other countries on earth, except China.
Except for China, exactly. I think Melbourne took the cake with the harshest lockdown in Australia. In Brisbane, Queensland, we're actually a lot more spread out and managed to survive not too badly. But it was a deep dive for me into a lot of spiritual growth. And I did a lot of study at that time, looked at plant medicine. We've got Australian bushflower remedies available to us. I did NLP studies, the Reiki healing holy fire to add on to my Reiki 1 and 2. I did an Access Bars consciousness certificate. So really, I've always been in education and I've always had a love of learning. And I really, because of the global pandemic, I wanted to then refocus that particularly on health and wellness for anyone basically that requires some daily practice tools that can reduce stress, reduce anxiety, help with burnout, support people in trauma and grief, in loss. And obviously, it affected families in many different ways. So I've seen everyone from children right through to grandmas. Last week, I had two clients come, and their combined age was 140 years. So that's a lot of wisdom. It's a
That's
lot of wisdom between the two ladies. So you're never too old to learn something new.
that's definitely for sure. So we've heard that you have a very large portfolio, so many things you've studied, learned, and there's so many conversations that can go. But there are a couple of interesting elements, and I'm always hoping that I can bring with each and every new podcast at least some new angle, not 3 times to hear the same basically story. There's always an angle that I hope that interests people. And I think we will focus on a large part today on your specific background of learning. And because whenever spirituality you look at, there's a high element of self-improvement, but also of learning, accepting new realities, accepting new knowledge, opening oneself up to new information and processing this information and then sharing this information. So if we leave, so to say, the information itself aside and just look at technicality, that itself is very interesting. And actually, people who were a long time in spirituality, they quite often are very interested in the technicalities more than in all the sparkly effects. If you look at meditation teachers, they get obsessed with the right breathing, the postures, and all of those technical elements. And so if you get that, then the train can start running and the spiritual elements will happen, right? So let's talk about, for a good portion of this podcast, about all the which ways that education, learning, information preparation, information handling, and all of this plays a vital role in spirituality. Give us some first thoughts, and then let's take it from there.
Okay. So I've taught anything from 4-year-olds right up to 13-year-olds. So from the education point of view, I'm well learned in how to break things down and keep things basic, keep things fun, keep things interesting and engaging. And I like to think that I can bring that now to the other end of the spectrum, which is, I guess, people in the older age brackets. And as I said, you're never too old to learn a new trick or two. I've taught over Zoom. I've taught in classrooms. I've taught out in the outdoors. So many different settings. I've taught in international schools in Hong Kong, where the teaching style was very different to what I was used to. Typically, I think students in Australia, adults in Australia are quite lighthearted and have a bit of a joke. I certainly didn't find that in international setting in Hong Kong, in schools and kindergartens. It was very structured and very rigid in the way they wanted lessons and information transfer and assessed. My I'm so passionate at the moment about presenting this new curriculum, which is the holistic wellness for corporates, in a story. Because I always love telling stories. I have to say, my dad can tell a really good story, not always 100% factual. He says never to let the truth get in the way of a good story. We call them tall stories here in Australia. So if you've added a little bit, some white lies, it's a tall story. I can't say that I do tall stories, but I don't mind whimsical stories, fairy tales, fables, and then I guess they're all based on fiction. They're fictional characters that I'm using, but the holistic practices and the learning, so basing around some pillars of forgiveness, grace, love, kindness, compassion, they're the pillars that I try to bring into every story. And then daily practices through NLP, emotional intelligence, self awareness, growth, ways to set people's days up for success. I'd like to share all those sorts of things in my stories so that people have got takeaways and they're relatable and heart centered.
This is very interesting that you're saying this right now, because I've been the last couple of days thinking a lot about this in so many different ways. And actually, it's very deep and important that we again open ourselves up of good
Yes.
storytelling to initiate
Mm,
spiritual growth, because that seems to be something that we have a bit lost over the last 20, 30 years in a way. There's a lot of books always written, there's always a lot of stuff. But if we look at the 19th century and stuff like that, those big awakening literature, right? There was a huge trend in Europe with awakening literature coming from different ways and different angles. And it has created a whole generation of instilling the spark of a surge, the spark of the light, and all of the stuff that you've said now. And this has a bit, right? It is not as strong, it's not as popular right now as it used to be. And especially when you talk about the corporate world, I think this is quite interesting that you would not want to have another coaching seminar, not just another sit down and somebody's talking and everybody's just waiting for the lunch
correct.
break. But did you want to write a story that people can identify different characters and have the themes and just trickle the thinking into people's
Mm,
mind? That so these stories are, as I said, whimsical, or how does it supposed to manifest? It's like books you want to put on the shelf and the manager might buy it and then get the information, or it's directly shared with the people in certain companies? Is it company related stories? Does, I don't know, Google call you and said, write as a Google fairy tale that
Yes.
implemented? How does this
Okay,
manifest?
so it started with LinkedIn, and I was writing stories for pet owners. So people would send a photo of their animal and some information, and then I would craft a story that was very personal and very heart centered. Lots of tears from lots of people over the 18 months that I've been doing this. I would just email them out. And then I was doing some market research for a trip to Bahrain and Jeddah and Saudi. And so I did a fictional three characters, three women, three different age brackets, and they were from the Middle East. And I took them from how they woke up in the morning through their corporate day until they went at night to bed, and took into consideration their Islamic backgrounds, their age bracket, whether they're single, married, all the different stresses that they might face. And I wove it into a story and I sent it out to a platform called Playbook that connects women in the MENA region. And just as a teaser to see if it resonated, and the feedback was phenomenal. I was encouraged to write more stories. And so then I started to write and just add them as a blog onto the end of my website. And so now I pretty much just will do a story maybe once or twice a week and just add it onto LinkedIn. And hopefully it will be someone like Google that picks them up, and or a company, and I can write for them. What else is possible?
That would be so lovely, and it would be a real new way. Why would they not,
Correct.
right? If we have good storytelling, if we have our corporate values, identities, or
Mm,
whatever we want to instill with our people, why would we not have a continuous block or something like that, where we start to create this and instill those information? It's been done for thousands of years,
correct.
basically, and it worked for thousands of
Correct.
years. And why it's so interesting to me, if I can steal a minute of your time, it was when you're a young father and you have a young daughter and you want to give them certain values. And even if you're non-religious or if you're relaxed about religion, if you're not going to church or this or that, and the kid looks at you and you try to tell them some important allegory or some important life message, by the end of the day, you remember the Christian stories here and the little stories there, and you think, "Oh dear Lord, they are
Mm,
clever," because they get the message across, and you like it or don't like it, you end up telling your kids these stories that you heard as a kid, church-related stories, because they're spot on the message that you want to get across: be good, be kind, and stuff like that, right?
correct.
Yes,
Yes.
storytelling is super
I think so.
important.
And I think we disregard that modern day storytellers are our pop princesses like Taylor Swift or the Ed Sheerans who sing ballads, right? They're telling a story through song. And in a world where we get so much information, and information is so much, can get anything at your fingertips. The difference between telling a story is it's relatable and it's safe and it just feels relaxing. It's got a different energy around it. And I'm really into the energy behind words and the power that words hold. And they can harm us or they can help us. And I really, if you follow me on LinkedIn or anything, I'm constantly posting around the power of the words that you choose. They're either a limiting, self limiting belief, or they can help you rewrite your new narrative, your new page, your new chapter, your new story, which is very healing because it keeps you in present time. You can only heal if you're in present time. If you go into the future, you're going into the what ifs. If you go into the past, you're going into your pain and your suffering and trauma, your regret. And so there's no healing to be done there. You have to be present time. And stories keep us present time. And when we're engaged and it's hooked us in and we're biting our nails, waiting for the next element, that's when the magic happens. It's the alchemy of words.
Absolutely. But just you said something so true. And I'm also worried about it for quite a bit, that the new storytelling mainly happens through pop
Mhm.
songs. I'm completely with you there. I look at my daughter and her friends and her generation, where they get, so to say, the stories. You're absolutely right. And I just have a picture in my head a couple of days ago in the back of the car, three girls. I'm driving them to some party or some children's birthday. I cannot
Mhm.
remember. And all three girls singing, I can buy myself flowers. And I'm thinking, oh, dear Lord, wrong information.
Uh-huh. Well, we're actually seeing a decline of children reading books, okay? Because they want everything instant and it takes effort to read a book. And so over 29 years, I have seen such a decline in children love a story, but they love you to read them the story. It takes the effort out of it. So we're seeing a decline in children reading. So my job then is to share stories and make sure that they're still getting those messages and those pillars of love and forgiveness, kindness.
I have to share this with you. My daughter is the example of a complete opposite of all smart theories. I'm an obsessive reader. I'm a book lover. I have a whole library at home, and I couldn't wait my daughter to be born so I can bombard her with reading her stories because I love to read and I wanted to read my old children books again. So I just couldn't wait for her. Finally, she's here. Let's reading. So she's grown up in a house where there are more books than
Yes.
windows. She's been and I've been reading to her ever since all the time, and she hates reading. She's allergic
I
to
know.
books. She gets a red rash on the skin if you just show her a book.
I've got three sons and none of them read. None. I don't even know how they've gotten through high school. One's about to start university. One's off being a pilot, and they don't read. And I'm the exact opposite. I have 5 or 6 books on the go. And I tell you not something else cool. So I was the first person to bring story dogs into our school. So it's a program here in Australia where you can train your dog up to take into schools and then you sit and you just read children books and they pat the dog and they put the book on the dog and they put the feet on the dog and they read the story to the dog. The dog listens to 3 or 4 stories, and it was a magical time to share with children and just to watch the engagement between the animal and the child and the reading happening. And just that there's no fear or expectation around getting it wrong. And it built self-confidence.
Well, I hope, I pray to the Lord that my daughter is not watching this podcast because all she wants is an animal at home. And if she hears that that might be the trick, I get me a cat and I will read every day. I'm doomed.
Well, I would get it was like a mob scene, like how they have flash mobs. So I'd bring my dog into the school and suddenly I'd be surrounded by 30 children and they all wanted to be that person that got to read with the dog during the school hours. And they actually now have maybe three or four dogs visit weekly. So it's quite a well received program.
In case you find this podcast, this whole part's been editing out, please do not be angry at me. It's self defense.
No problem at all. Just stick with
All
me.
right. You said something also the big subject. So you opened the door to a huge conversation, and that's alchemy of words, which is something that is a endless subject. If you look at, I know, Kabbalah and Jewish tradition, if we look at alchemy, if we in the Western tradition, if we study of scripture, the endless repetition. Interestingly enough, if it's Buddhistic repetition, if it's Islamic repetition, there's like a lot of repetition cultures. We have the singing element, the healing element in Chinese, where you get a little song to heal you against certain diseases that actually exists in a lot of cultures, even in the Catholic cultures, that you sing Ave Maria if you want to heal your heart, and you sing other things if you want to sing other things. So I open you the floor to alchemy of words and how you tackle it. Do you have technical approach, scientific approach, how you go into this insanely complex conversation about alchemy of words?
Hey. So I'm going to give you my lived experience. So I am well read on the subject, but I think I learn best by doing. And so I had a story, a tragedy in 2009 where I had a plot twist. I was pregnant with my third son and I had stage 3 angiosarcoma and it went to my lungs and my leg. So I went from the maternity ward in Hong Kong to the oncology ward once my son was born. And I was in a horror story, let's say, for at least 5 years. But once I had made those 5 years, because they talk about 5 years and clear, I said that I would be free of cancer. But I found myself stuck in this story of waiting for the other shoe to drop. When was it coming back? What if? What if? And the language I use, the stories, I found I would be just constantly talking about cancer. I was either the survivor or I was a mentor or I was defined by it. Everything seemed to come back to this story. And I got to about 10 years into this story and I decided I'd had enough of it. I didn't want to be in that story anymore and I wanted to move forward and live life presently. I had been doing a lot of reading. There's an author by the name of Caroline Mace. She's a medical intuitive. She's American. Should be easy to find. She's got more than 30 years of experience in why some people don't heal and never will is one of her books. She does anatomy of the spirit. She does a lot of work on archetypes. And I couldn't get enough of her books. And basically, I decided that I would then study the NLP and look at the way I was using my words. I decided to cut all energetic ties to cancer and only leave things that served me for my highest good. And I spontaneously started to change my entire life. Things just I can't even, it transformed on such a level that I literally recreated myself. And people tell me all the time that I quite like that they say, A, I look younger, but also B, that I'm not the same person. And some people say that when they go through a trauma, of course, you can't be the same person. I'd like to think that I'm a better person because I actually using the language around my experience, I can now find the gifts, the wisdom, the tools, the lessons, positive, the self belief from my journey through cancer and the story.
So, I'm politely break you. So to clarify, you think when we talk about language, you talk more about the thought, and the thought creates certain advisedly used
Mhm.
words. You don't talk about the word itself might have a as is alchemistic or a more a aura or a certain symbolistic that creates energy. So you think more about the thought structure and then using wisely compared to the concept of a word itself creates energy field that affects the person who listens to the word.
Actually, both. But how long is
Huh.
a piece of string, right? The words that you use, absolutely, and so thought becomes matter. So we're constant, like the words that we're using, they're having an energetic experience for our biology in our body. So words around emotions like fear or stress or angry or frustrated actually hold a different aura, a different energy than trust, surrender, grace, release, joy. And I my learned experience through that is that I was so numb for so long that I couldn't experience those high vibe words. I could not find joy or that feeling of elation. And that's what took me to look at the alchemy of words.
Because one of the things I'm interested in because of chanting as a meditation teacher,
Yep.
one else, that you look at the vocals and how they create certain energy and how they activate certain chakra and energy fields. And then if you look at joy, it's E in the end, E it's a high. and it transforms. And because of OE, the concept of the word brings the energy from up
Hmm.
to down. That's basically how I would look at language or words or songs or things like that. I would always look which chakras it activates, in which precise you start from that chakra, you end to that, or you go via this and so forth. And therefore you can look at all words and you can color them and you can understand its a certain purpose when you mix them together and how you create then this small chant, things
I
like that.
love
So this is what this is my
that's your specialty, and I love that. I love learning about it. I Music is medicine, absolutely. I use sound bowls for when I'm doing Reiki healing. I only use two actually, so I use the solar plexus and the heart chakra, and I find I have the best results with just those two bowls. I haven't studied a lot of like around sound medicine, sound clearing, healing, but I love to learn. So that would be something that I look to do in the future.
there is fun fact that a lot of composers, they describe their compositions more with colors than with music at all. And I know a lot of especially classic musicians, they if you ask them for a certain piece in a private conversation, they all say, oh, it's lila, and then there's a red influence. So they see music
Hmm.
more than they hear music. They have very strong visuality with music as
Hmm.
colors, very precise colors, less than they actually are focused on the sound element of music, which I think is very interesting when we then talk about alchemy of words. Once you see a poem or see certain things, there's a lot of authors again who then understand the poem as a color, which I find
Me
fascinating.
too. And I'm definitely, as you can see, I'm a pink person, but I'm very much, I see auras, I see colors, and yeah, life. I don't know. Some of my trips that have been overseas and like when the fashion's really dark, you can really feel like the energy behind the dark winter clothing. I just find it suffocating. Like it really affects my aura. Makes I go to my wardrobe and I already know what color I'm going to wear for the day. It really sets me up for success.
And that brings me back to your story about those
Mm.
three women. Now, I have to ask now, if you have those women in your mind, do you have them as a person with a character, or do you see them as a color, as an aura, or is all of it when you write about them? How do you feel these
Yes.
characters?
So I have to say I had the visual of what they look like, and all I could do was to do the research right online because I had no exposure previously of going to these countries. I could see them and I just had to feel into everything about them. So yes, I'm a very visual person. Actually, there wasn't a lot of color around the three women I was writing about. I'd have to say that after living and going overseas and doing those trips, there wasn't a lot of color like in the fashion I was. Certainly they wear abayas. The abayas are generally black and then they'll wear clothing underneath. So they'll take the abaya off when they're in a private space. That's when the color comes into it. But I found it really, I guess, confronting, like seeing the men were wearing white, the women were wearing black, and it was like just gray. It was a very interesting experience.
I had a couple of conversations now with Oran seeing people, and we talked also about the fact that if you were completely naked and you have your kind of aura that you have on that day, and then you would wear a bright pink clothes, that your aura would start to a little bit
Yeah.
transform because the color that you're wearing would have an effect on the aura of the person. And of course, this becomes very interesting in the aspect that you're telling that the whole country is wearing black.
Mm.
So that's an interesting
Yeah,
one, right?
yeah. I did ask lots of questions, and everyone was very accommodating and kind and humored me because I really wanted to understand. So I asked about the black abayas, and because of the heat over there, generally the women in Saudi will come out at night. And so the black is for modesty. and that the men wear the white during the day because they're more out and about in roles outside, and so it's lighter and reflects the heat. But I had so many questions, but I get to ask more because I'm looking forward to going back there later in the year.
This is wonderful that you have this opportunity. Sorry, I'm so overwhelmed with all the information. I don't see where we should bring it next. But I think it was a women conference, right? You
Yes,
went through to
yes,
Bahrain, and you were able to share with them the story and the books that you've wrote. Do you actually have a message? Maybe let's a little bit have a question in between questions. Do you have a woman empowering message or a message of kindness? You said forgiveness. Do you have actually a message, or is just a spiritual enlightenment message? So that's maybe something that would be interesting. And how did the women, because interesting enough, I had a conversation yesterday with somebody telling me that they do the biggest business. And I was so surprised with Dubai, Bahrain, Oman, and so forth, that this is right now the world's biggest business with clairvoyance, with all of these things. The number one business is happening actually in Arabia. I didn't see that coming my
yeah,
way. So that's why I'm asking you how these all threads weaving
yes.
together.
Um, So so my speech very much was around spirituality in terms of non-denominationals. I don't have Islamic experience, so I wanted to keep it very neutral. And I connected in basically that we were in that room, we were all mothers, we were all daughters, sisters, friends. So I wanted to connect into that we are all one, basically, so that we're all one, that we all go through adversity, and basically through that adversity we can rise like phoenix from the ashes, and from that adversity you can recreate yourself. You can either stay in the woe, or you can go into the wisdom, and the wisdom is around the lessons of how it has affected your self-belief, around compassion that you've been able to show for yourself and for others and for your body, right? So there was a stage during my treatment where I felt really let down by my body, that it had failed me, and I was quite resentful. But actually it was continuously healing me throughout. So it was my expectation, I guess my agenda, that I wasn't in that awareness at that point in time. The grace that allows us to, push through when the odds are against us. The gratitude, how you can be grateful and show up every day and look just for the small things. Like I really wanted to focus in on just the smallest bits of gratitude, whether it was wearing a bright lipstick and having the nurses that were treating me try and guess what color lipstick I was going to be wearing for that day. So bringing some fun, and because laughter really is a medicine. They have clowns here. I guess there's a movie, was it Patch Adams years ago? The movie Patch Adams. So they have the hospital doctors and the clowns that go and try and make patients laugh and help with their healing. So there's always a chance to bring fun and laughter to situations. It can also be an alchemy of change, a chemical reaction for the body, and love. Like at the base of everything is love. And when we can receive love, then we can give love. So we must love ourselves first before that we can be in receiving of other people's love. And it was really hard. I actually thought that I was quite good at receiving love until you're so overwhelmed with people's kindness, getting food drops and people looking after my children and people cleaning my house. And it was really uncomfortable. It was a learned skill, and I had to trust and surrender that through this kindness, that all that was
Wow.
expected was gratitude. And I was absolutely grateful.
Yeah. You summed up all spiritual wisdom of the world: trust and
Trust and
surrender.
surrender. Not that fear and control that kept
Yeah.
me spiraling for many
That's that's all there is. If you know those two words, you're already on the way
years.
to Buddha. But hard job.
Yes.
I regrouped a bit and found my way back into the questions. Thank you for a little bit filling me because I got stuck in the conversation, but happens to everyone. There are a couple of more questions left for our time. I said one is that we should talk about at this point is you said older people and their spiritual needs. So that's something that we agreed on that we want to a little bit
Hmm.
talk about. Something else that we a little bit talked in our pre meet and greet was about that language creates a space and different cultures have different languages that create thought structures. Maybe we'll come to that, maybe not some
Hmm.
other time. It's rather interesting and it's developing a lot internationally in the science
Hmm.
community that there are more and more research on certain thoughts being created in certain languages that can't be created or not in the exact way in other languages. I think it's a very interesting
Yes,
part,
you touched
especially
on that
for
the
a
other
writer.
day. I don't have a lot of information about that, but I'd love to know more about it if you could share some, maybe by email or something.
We all do. And I think this will be a hot subject for
Mm.
years to come. And so let's dive. And the last one, and we'll start there before we go to the older people, is with one of my favorite subjects is the concept of forgiveness. Would you like to share a couple of your ideas because we can't hear it enough, the concept of forgiveness? And I think because we need to every day talk about forgiveness.
Absolutely. Forgiveness is for ourselves, not necessarily that we condone someone else's behavior or a situation or something. So it's for peace for ourselves. And when I offer forgiveness to people, places, and things, it's for to free me. And then I send it back to the universe so that it frees everyone and raises consciousness. It's a very difficult thing for people to, I guess, understand. And also, they say that I'll never forgive someone that has wronged me. And you can see that it really blocks their ability to make better choices, feel like they have a choice at all, to move past the resentment and the anger, perhaps the guilt, and it feeds the ego. So, the ego, and for, I heard a fabulous term the other day, ego is edging God out or edging goddess energy out. So, forgiveness and love, self belief, it's the way to move forward. Without forgiveness, you can really get stuck.
Are you worried a bit that this young generation right now is not big on the concept of forgiveness? It's not
I
popular right
know.
now.
Yes. And that's why storytelling is so important, right? So we're just going to repetition. You spoke about it earlier, just repeat, repeat, repeat. I guess something that pops to mind is they're all rights, no responsibility. It's a generation where people know all their rights, but they don't want to be responsible or accountable for their actions, which is a difficult.
Or their participation of an
Yes,
action. It's both
yes,
ways, right? They don't want to be responsible for their actions, always somebody else guilty. And also, if they're part of something, they always don't want to take their element of
yes.
responsibility. It's a big issue, I
Acceptance.
think.
Acceptance. I was listening to a Mel Robbins podcast the other day, and she talks about ABCs. Accept the things that you can't change, and then apologize for your part that you take in the story. And a lot of people find it really hard to own their part in the story. There's always three elements, right? Your side of the story, their side, and the truth. But you must be able to own your part in the story. And then she talks about, and then have a conversation. We find it really difficult to have conversations, especially face to face. There's a lot of keyboard warriors. There's a lot of children that've come through the pandemic where they're unable to look you in the eye. They were like this for so long. You can't read facial cues. They're not very good at reading your body language. And so have a conversation. And in that conversation, don't bring opinions and judgment and ego, all those things to the table. Just listen with compassion, be a heart with ears. Just listen. And then let it brew, let it take some time, have a breather. And then generally, You can ask then for another conversation a little bit later when they've had time to process. And I like to talk about, I ride horses, and so when an animal, like when a horse is processing something that they have learnt, we call it lick and chew. You see them like licking and chewing as the emotions are processing through their body. Cats yawn, dogs yawn. Animals are processing those emotions all the time. And once they've processed it, have another conversation. And generally, when you cut the energy ties to it, then it should be done and dusted. So they say that you can tell a story 3 times before you lock those emotions into your body. The first time it's true for you. The second time you're telling it because you want it to be the truth that you tell other people. And the third time is that you're locking it into your body, and subconsciously those emotions are stored. And Caroline Mace talks a lot about patterns, as does Chinese medicine, about where these emotions are stored. I obviously did a lot of work around grief, and lungs hold grief. So the patterns, they come up all the time in the body where you are storing those emotions. Not to say that they manifest into disease, but they do have a biochemical influence or impact. Your biography becomes your biology.
Yes, I'm absolutely with you 100%. And I just have to say, I was not planned to speaking about it today, but when you just mentioned it, just for a quick second to say, you talk about this short period of time of Corona and those kids
Mm,
having their mask, and how we have already research and information, how much it affected their natural progress and
mm,
development. And this was just relatively short event, right? If we compare this to social
mm,
media, which is a full blown event for now such a long time, and how little research we have on the crazy effect it most probably has. If Corona had an effect,
correct.
well, what about social media that creates a whole new dimension of communication and interaction and has completely changed people's approach? And not to mention artificial intelligence
Mm.
coming next. So uh, we are ready to talk about Corona, no problem here, but we can't talk about social media except Australia, which is, oh my God, you made me so happy, you Australians, with, with the newest role on social media for kids. Bravo,
Yeah,
well done.
we try. We'll see how successful we are. I'll put it out there.
That's the way. That's the way to go. Nothing against modern technology. I'm completely nothing against, but just let's protect our children to grow up in a natural environment, develop normal human skills, become just regular humans, and then knock
Mm,
yourself out. But just give them a couple of years where they can be protected as children, as
mm.
humans, to learn basic human skills. There is enough time to learn programming, enough time to learn gaming, enough time to learn to sit alone in the room and type
Right.
something. There's endless time to
It's
be
a can
weird.
of worms
Just
from a teacher's point of view. You can't compete with an iPad. You can't compete with computer time, an iPad, and all the other technology. We're too boring. It doesn't matter whether we're standing on our head and we've got a clown suit on. You cannot compete with electronics, and kids just love them. But we are finding handwriting skills, pincer fingers, fine motor skills, being able to hold a pencil, pick things up, talking about people like kids that aren't able to swing on playgrounds or swim because they've missed all those lessons during time spent on either media or global pandemics. And yeah, the impact, oh my goodness, the impact. It's interesting though, when you have glitches, which we seem to have, we don't have the best internet in Australia, I have to say. And trying to have 3 children on the internet during COVID was an absolute nightmare. I kept dropping out. And you have to go back to old school, right? And luckily for me, I've got 29 years of old school tricks up my sleeve, but people founder, like they don't know what to do. They can't teach unless it's electronically.
yes. It's time is running out, but that would be a whole conversation. And maybe one day you will return because I have many podcasts on the subject how to instill spirituality with children. It's one of the reoccurring
Yes.
themes. in my podcast. So maybe we'll make another session that. Let's give you the last couple of minutes. First of all, to a little bit again talk about your work as a therapist, what you're doing mainly one-on-ones online, or you mainly work with people live. Just give us one more time a repetition from the beginning of things that how to connect with you, what you offer. So we'll lock this in so people have gotten to know you. And if they want to work with you, please present this one more
Okay.
time.
By the way, I'm still figuring this part out. So I do have a website.
Welcome to the
Yeah.
club.
It's a work in progress. So I've literally been doing a website, it feels like forever. And it's never quite right. It's always evolving and I'm always changing it. And anyway, so I have a website. I like to think that LinkedIn is my advocate because I get to showcase my stories, my information around words and the energy of words. I keep it all very professional. So I guess LinkedIn is a great one. I do stories and lives on Instagram, and that's I discovered that's another way to tell a story. So I've only just started those, so there's probably only maybe 5 or 6. So I have Instagram, and I've been doing key speaking in different places around the world. My next one is Paris, going to Paris for International Women's Day, which I'm super excited about. And then Riyadh, I'm going back to Riyadh in April for the Women's Economic Forum. But reach out, I use WhatsApp. I'm pretty much across everything and I may connect up.
And you also, and you also one-on-ones,
Yeah.
right? People can book you for spiritual or clairvoyance or what is the things that you offer in your
Yes,
one-on-ones?
yes. So, of course, everything is available on Zoom or Teams or Google Meet. I do one-on-ones. I did do a corporate workshop, a group workshop. It's still new to me teaching on Zoom. So that's a work in progress. But I'd like to think that it's a global audience that I can reach because I really can see the need for this type of education further afield. I think we are very saturated, I can't say the word, in Australia with health and wellness and from children right through to nursing homes. We provide programs and coaching and facilitators and everything else in this space. So I'd like to bring it to other parts of the world where I can share my wisdom.
It's absolutely fair enough. And I think we are blessed that we are on the beginning of a journey, part of this conversation. And maybe in 2, 3 years, you'll drop back and there's already the structure, the system, and the whole. And we've been part of the beginning when thoughts are created. And that's exactly a huge privilege for all of us being here. Thank you so much for this. We could talk for
Good.
hours. A lot of questions haven't touched, but that's how it is. We got an idea, and thank you very much from my point, and I hope we'll do another one in
I
the future. And everybody,
I'd love that. I'd love you
thank you,
to come back and do this again.
thank you.